go for it. Let's begin.
All right. Okay, so a very good evening and welcome to the Workplace Inclusion Index's webinar, Fundamentals of DEI Part 2. Thank you to everyone for taking time out to join us today. I'm Isha Temni and my pronouns are she and her. We have with us Sandhya Ramesh, she, her, Head Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Great Place to Work India, in conversation with Kanan Iyer, People Director Asia at Soho House Mumbai, and Akanksha Bhavani Shankar, House Manager at Soho House Mumbai. Over the course of the next 40 minutes, we will be speaking about creating leadership alignment and involvement in driving diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI strategies, creating shared accountability for DEI goals, critical inclusive leadership traits, overcoming challenges posed by businesses as usual to a more inclusive way of working, which will be followed by a live audience Q&A and a rapid fire round. So before we get into the session, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists for this evening. We'll start off with Kanan. Kanan Iyer is the People Director and Head DEI for Asia at Soho House and Company. He believes people are the crux of an organization's DNA, and as such, believes that when we as leaders listen, learn, understand, accept, and respect, we create a workplace which is safe, equitable, belonging, diverse, and inclusive. For it takes 7 colors to make a beautiful rainbow. As a lifelong proponent of equality, equanimity, and inclusivity, he has managed to shape the culture of high-performing organizations to be more robust, inclusive, and people-oriented. He was named among the top 20 DEI influential leaders of India 2022 and awarded DNI Inspirational Role Model of the Year 2022 in hospitality. Akanksha Bhavani Shankar is an engaging communicator with a proven track record in guest management. Building strong, motivated teams has been her driving force, spearheading extensive departmental trainings throughout her career. With prior experience at the Taj Group, the Leela, and Marriott International, she is part of DEI initiatives in her current role as House Manager at Soho House Mumbai. Thank you both for joining us today, and over to you, Sandhya.
Thank you, Isha.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Isha. And thank you for being here, Kanan and Akanksha. And thank you to all our delegates and participants on today's webinar. Thank you for taking time and being here. Just some context, and I'm sure most of you know about Great Place to Work Institute and the work that we do in the space of workplace culture and assessment. And over the last 5 years, we've been, I think, one of the leading organizations when it comes to research and consulting to understand diversity, equity, and inclusion, starting off with gender and then being able to also transition to acknowledging intersectionality as a broader construct in the workplace with the launch of the Workplace Inclusion Index. And we've been having some of these conversations. So in fact, Kanan and Akanksha, we do this every month where there is an opportunity for us to take back to the community real-time learning from organizations such as yours. And we know that Soho House Mumbai is one of the organizations that have been accredited for inclusive practices by Great Place to Work Institute. What does that mean? I think for some of us who may not know about what the accreditation aims to do, the accreditation is, an effort to really integrate inclusion as a very core value in the culture, right? And how do we do that? It is by integrating it better with our practices that are aimed at employees, stakeholders, and customers, right? So we do look at, a slightly more holistic aspect around, our practices with all our stakeholders. And, there is a minimum cutoff. We look at least 50% of the criteria being met for an organization to be, an accredited organization. Yeah. Having said that, it's also given us a repository to learn a lot more about how organizations have, been transitioning through their journeys. And I think about 2 months ago, we got some feedback from the participants of the webinar who said, we've got to really go back to, some of the basics. So we want to go back to saying fundamentals. Where do we start? It just seems like a slightly complex place. Do we start with hiring? Do we start with practices? Should I get my leaders on board? But what do I get my leaders on board? How much is too much? How less is not going to have any impact? So I don't know, like just so many, questions that came to us saying that, okay, how can we break it down and maybe utilize the examples of various organizations who've been through this journey? And this is also a submission from our end. We know that each journey of every organization and every individual is very unique and can be very different. But I think these platforms at least create space for conversations when we know what worked, what didn't work, what stayed with us along the way. So I think the way we also position some of the conversations is to really create a safe space for learning, right? And with that is why we have, Kannan and Akanksha today from Soho House. For some of us who are in Mumbai and who travel the globe as well, it's quite a premium club chain, right? And I think I had an opportunity actually to connect with Kannan and the global team, I think almost about 2.5 years ago, when they were etching and starting the journey, commencing the journey in India as part of also the global charter that was drawn together, right, at and hold on, where's my, oops. Hi, can you all see me?
Yes,
we can.
Yes.
And I think with that context in mind, maybe, Kannan, you can talk about it, because we could have, say, a few audiences who are part of, say, larger MNCs. And today's focus in today's webinar is part 2 really focuses on, while part 1 focused on actually creating those policies and practices, the part 2 today is really focusing on how do we get leadership's participation, involvement, advocacy in the entire journey of driving a more inclusive workplace, right? And maybe Kannan, if you can tell us a little bit about just the genesis of, how did that story begin in India? How did you get the leadership team involved? So while there was a global charter, while there were some clear pillars, some clear non-negotiables, which also started appearing at the time of the Black Lives Matter movement. Right. How did you seed it with the India leadership team initially?
All right. I think let me begin with this. I think it all started from when Soho House itself began, right? I mean, in 1995, when Nick actually started this brand, the idea was all about diversity and inclusivity, right? I mean, the brand itself was born from the fact that there were a few people in the creative community who didn't feel comfortable going to probably an premium club or a high-end club or whatever what was called at that point of time, and felt kind of discriminated during that time, right? And that's when this entire concept of Soho House came about, where we call ourselves an exclusive members club, catering to people from the creative field. And it doesn't really matter which socioeconomic background they really come from. And that really forms like the crux of our DNA, right? And when it all started in India, like you were just explaining, and that's the context of our conversation, the first time we spoke, Sandhya, right? I mean, it all started from that Black Lives Matter, and it was probably just a renewed, energy that was infused into our D&I philosophy. And for Mumbai, it became a little bit more prominent, is because as an organization, we wanted to give a lot back to the community, right? And it was really important that when we're starting an initiative which is around diversity, equity, and inclusion, the leadership really sponsors you and stands by you, right? So, and it all came in a stepwise manner, right? Because it's really important that you go one step at a time rather than go out there all out, because you actually learn when you're going a step at a time, right? And the first thing that we wanted to do was, let's look at women in the house with the leadership team, right? And the first thing that we ever did in the house was to install a sanitary pad vending machine, right? And that was our first step towards creating an inclusive environment. And the leadership really really bought into that idea. They were standing behind us. They were ready to sponsor us, and we got that rolling. And from there, we decided, let's relook at our policies a little. What can we do better in terms of policies? And we said, let's start a little smaller again when it comes to policies. And again, we said that let's look at a community which we can focus on better. And again, that was the women community, right? And we said we will start the menstrual leaves for women at workplace. So we started with 2 days, no questions asked, leave a month, which women can avail, and really help build that confidence with the management. And of course, the leadership saw that there is really scope for us to move ahead and do more, especially Laurent, Fatima, who was our then chief people officer, and Kelly at our regional or local site level, right? And we started experimenting with a little bit more around the policies, and we introduced, we actually enhanced our paternal leave policy from 10 days to 30 days. Then we introduced a parental leave policy, which is specifically for same-sex couples who would like to go for assisted reproduction or adoption. We said that there's a 90-day leave that they can avail now. And then we went back to our insurers, right? And generally, you don't see that happening much in India. And, I went back to a lot of insurers to say that we need to cover transgender as a part of our insurance policy, right? And also start with gender reassignment surgery as a part of our insurance policy. Surprisingly, and that was one of my assumptions, was that I thought a lot of private players will be keen to do something like this, but it turned out to be one of the government-run insurance companies who actually came forward and accepted our request and let us make those policies. So basically, the leadership, one, of course, we need our leaders to stand by us and to sponsor us, but it's really important that we give them the confidence and show them what these policies or these changes when it comes to DEI can actually do, and make them executive sponsors and make them like they are a part of that entire initiative that we are doing, and that really drives top down. And once you see the leaders really reflecting on it and really initiating those ideas, it becomes, it really it's like a trickle down effect, and people till the bottom level actually feel the change and the positivity.
Thank you. Thanks, Kannan. And, I remember being, us being part of the journey, because I remember, I think the first step saying that we really need to assess our workplace climate, right? And I think while we knew what happened in the forward of the partnership, I'd love to understand some of the intricacies, right? It did start with saying, let's get all our HODs together. Let's get them to understand where we are today in our journey, and involve them in the process of prioritizing what we can take up, right, in each of our teams. What was it, in the back end, Kannan? What was it like? And how did they actually get involved in the prioritizing? What did it require between Kelly and you, who was also then, Kelly was the, the head for the India division. And what did it really take for both of you to be able to, one, get the leadership involved? If you talk about those 2 or 3 critical success factors of getting involvement and participation, what would you?
When it came to my colleagues, my HODs, and getting them to prioritize diversity and inclusion, I think the first step was acceptance. Accepting the fact that this diversity actually exists amongst us. We are not looking at something different. We don't want you to treat people differently, but accepting the fact that it is there, and they're no different from us. I remember one very interesting conversation with an HOD that we were having, and it was like, but people from this community are always like that, but the challenge that I threw to this HOD was like, but what would you do if it was the same incident with a person from a different community? Then it's like, then it's okay. I said, then in this scenario also it is okay, because the people are behaving themselves, not about the community. So, these were some of the very interesting conversations that we used to have. So acceptance was the first step towards that, right? Second very important thing that we tried doing was intentional hiring. And when I say intentional hiring, was not to put percentages or numbers to diversity hiring, right? That's not what we wanted to do. We didn't want to build quotas around diversity hiring, but we wanted to build intentions around it. And when I said intentional hiring, is to try and find that same talent, that same skills that you need, but from a different community. For example, it could be the LGBTQ community, or the women community, or the disabled community. And it really built confidence in the HOD, saying that, yes, if we actually try to look at talent and skills, but from a different community, we can still find that same thing that we need from our people, right? And third thing was, of course, to give them that confidence and support that we are always there and we will support them no matter what. And we will ensure that, sensitization happens, training happens, even more is this lot of empathy that is built within the team. So we decided that we will be there, we will support you in all these functions. And, Akita has been such an important part of this journey of sensitizing, of building that empathy, of getting the team together. And it really, at the end of the day, it was all teamwork, and of course we have to break certain barriers. But for me, I thought, because Soho House culture itself is so imbibed in diversity and inclusion, I thought that my life was a little bit more easier in getting the team to rally around us. Probably organizations out there might face a lot more challenges, but I have a super team that they really bought into our ideas and really supported us when we were moving in this direction. And actually speaking, when I said intentional hiring, you remember January 2021 is somewhere around that we started talking, Sandhya, right? And I mean, of course, at that point of time, we still had only the male to female ratio and we didn't have the other communities around. We were in a ratio of about 81 to 19%. That is 81% male and 19% female. And today we have 74% male and 26% female. And that's the intentional hiring strategy that we're talking about. And I'm so happy that today, the top 2 people in Soho House Mumbai are women leaders, and one of them is sitting right next to me.
Thank you, Kanan.
Thanks, Kanan. Yeah, and I think it's also so relatable because for Soho House, it seems to be very close to the business, right? Sorry, Isha, I also saw your mic get unmute. Did you want to share something?
Sorry, that was accidental. Go on, please.
No? Okay. And I also know, Kanksha, you've had, I think, a journey of working with different organizations in the sector, and you've also now been with the team for, a few months. What's your perception? What do you think are those key shifts in leadership that, one would need to make in order to enable a more inclusive mindset?
I think, like Kanan said, one is been intentional hiring. So I think, joining this team was extremely refreshing after a good 15 years of having worked in hospitality and having thought like, I've seen the world, I've done this, this is going to be like it's going to be another bite of another cake, of a similar cake rather. And this has been so refreshing to work here, honestly, Sandhya, because, this is the first time that I'm getting to work with not just, like we spoke about, not just, the gender numbers, but also to do with people coming in from different backgrounds. Actually, on our team, we've got people from an autism spectrum. We've got, transgenders that I'm working for the very first time, in hospitality. And it's really surprising that that companies took this long or really haven't yet done this in India, so to speak, Sandhya. So I think it's a continuous learning process, even for me personally as an individual. I think I'm still learning. And it's interesting to see that, we've had so many trainings, even in the first couple of months that I came in, actually, we've had so many trainings. The first conversation started off with, bias. And bias is not just to do with gender, but generally from to do with race, to do with religion, anything else, So it's just about, we had a conversation on day one about biases. So it was really, really refreshing to kind of come into an organization that feels so passionately, I would say, about this cause. It's not just something that's printed in black and white, but it's actually something that we passionately feel about. And I think it's a continuous learning process. I don't think we've perfected it, but definitely, each and every one of us on the team definitely does pitch in our best and does try to understand, these things the best. So let me put it that way. It's more of an intent.
Thank you. Thanks. And, if I had to ask both of you to maybe just visualize an individual who you consider in your peer group or as a leader to be extremely inclusive or, inclusive of all communities and, that every time that you are with the person and others are with the person, there is an experience of.
I think I'm going to piggyback on what Kanan said. I think it's purely been, leadership at the helm. It started with Nick Jones. And honestly, I mean, it all kind of comes in from there, that energy, because he's the one who's created this diverse this environment that we thrive in and that we love to kind of be in. And of course, at unit levels, we do have Kelly, we do have Kanan, and especially Akita, who's not here, but, drives it from the back thoroughly. So I think these are all people but yeah, I think personally for me, it would be Nick Jones. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, of course, the idea and the energy and enthusiasm comes from there. But I'll also say our team members at the real bottom of the pyramid are amazing inclusive leaders. Let me put it this way, say, for example, I have a pot washer, right, who cleans dishes. He doesn't differentiate between who's eaten in that plate, but he cleans that dishes, right? My security guard doesn't ask you which religion, which caste, which gender, which community you belong to when he's welcoming or she's welcoming you into the property. Or my server doesn't ask you, about your religion, caste, or, race when he's taking your order. And I think that really, these are people who really are, for me, real life examples of exemplary D&I leaders.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the hospitality sector as well, right, has had a certain set of stereotypes, right, that we've built. And I remember Kanan having a chat with some of your colleagues about it a little earlier in the journey, whether it was to do with, the gendered role stereotypes, like somehow women in a bartending role seem to be such a misfit. Individuals who followed different religions in the back of house, in the kitchen, because they were working with so many varieties of meat. There seemed to be, a difference there. A whole sense of beauty bias that continued to somewhere exist for front-ending and customer-facing roles, right? I think in an industry that also comes with somewhere a lot of stereotyped, stereotyped assignment for different roles. What in how were you able to not only like identify saying that, okay, these are some stereotypes which we want to break, but how did you partner with, say, or how did you create that collaboration with others in the team to make it happen? Because it would also mean that you were looking at very non-traditional sources of hiring. It would also mean that, you had to foster a lot of talent mobility. So how did you get your leadership team to see eye to eye on that?
I mean, I can go back to an interesting discussion that I had yesterday, and it was on hiring. Uh, and the conversation was, no, we can't hire women in this role because they can't do it. It's very physical. And we had a nice, healthy discussion. And my question back to that leader was, how do you know that? They're like, no, it's from my experience. I said, all right. I said, you have these women in your team. Have they ever refused to do this work, saying it's physically impossible? They're like, no, I'm not talking about them. I said, then who are you talking about? And they're like, in my previous company. I said, but that's gone. But you have had a change of experience with the current team that you've had. Do they have a problem doing it? No, they don't. But it's that's not a place for women to work. I said, have any of your current women employees said that they can't work in that section? They're like, no, but, and he's like, no, they worked there before. I said, then where is the problem? I said, I see no issues in us trying to recruit. I mean, we're keeping our options open. We are not saying that we will hire only women or only a man or only person from a particular community, but it's really important to keep our eyes and ears and our mind open towards hiring the right talent. And like I said, whether then it becomes an intentional hiring of identifying that talent from a community, then that be it. But we should look for, and I think we should just look at things beyond our biases and our assumptions and our stereotyping of roles, where we feel that this is something that this person can't do, or that is something that a person can't do. I mean, an interesting conversation that I've also had with another leader was, oh no, I can't have a lady in the night shift. And the reason was, I said, why? And the reason was that I don't think ladies can talk to police, right? And my response was, have you ever seen that happening? It's like, no. I said, then why are we assuming that can't happen? So I think it's these conversations which helps some people break all these biases and stereotypes that they have in their mind, and it helps them look at things a little differently. And that's what I always believe in. I think for me, these conversations, these small, healthy debates or arguments is something which helps break a lot of these stereotypes. Of course, other than that, we have a lot of sensitization programs. We have monthly programs that we do. One of our hit programs on a monthly basis is our chat show, right? And we really try to bring people from different walks of life into that program so that we're able to understand things differently. I remember in one of those programs, we actually called somebody from the LGBTQ community. And when this person walked in, the assumption was this person is a transgender, all right? And when this person started talking and revealing more about himself, people really understood that it's not just male, female, transgender, but there also exists different parts of human life, which has non-binary, pansexual. And when this person revealed that I'm actually non-binary, there was kind of astonishment and surprise element that people had. And people actually started looking for things and trying to understand what all these different words or letters in the LGBTQ community really means.
Yeah. I think it takes me back to an article that one of my colleagues posted last night by, I think, Kalki Subramaniam on, that she posted on LinkedIn, where she was saying some fathers can menstruate and some mothers can't breastfeed, right? And I think that article actually opens out just so much more I think he's also writing like a book on that. But yes, I think there needs to be a fair mix, and I think that this is also what we notice in organizations who have been able to sustain a more authentic approach in driving inclusion is when there's a fair mix of formal interventions, but also some of these informal platforms to question and maybe voice your dilemmas, have a conversation around your dilemmas.
Yeah.
Right? Even basic ones like hiring, basic ones like role assignment, because that's where the impact of the bias, and that's how bias manifests, right? In so many ways.
True.
And if we had to take it one step ahead, we also know that your colleagues, at least most of the roles at Soho House, are extremely mostly customer facing. And I think we go by this principle which says employee equals customer, which largely means that you treat your employees like the way you want employees to treat your customers or your members in your case, right? Have you seen some of your interventions that we've been running with our employees also impact our customers over the last 2 years? Any examples that you can share with us on how this is impacting not only your customer experience, but also the brand perception?
Sorry, we lost you there.
We lost you towards the
last
end
one.
of your
question.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, Kannan?
Yes.
And Akansha? Great. Yeah. So are there any examples that you can share with us, Kannan and Akansha, over the last couple of years where you've seen some of these efforts in DEI actually impact, say, your customer experience or your member experience, as well as your brand, your customer brand? Anything that you'd like to share with us on this?
So Sandhya, one of the things that immediately comes to mind when you started talking about this, in fact, was one of the initiatives that our team has out here is very, very, very small things. But let me just start with this, because it just kind of none of our team members across the house actually wear a name tag or a name badge. And this is something that you typically go into, any hospitality organization, you're going to see somebody with the name tag or with the name plate. The purpose or the idea behind doing this also, encourages our members to actually get to know us as people and not really just kind of, treat them as one face representing the hotel or one person who's just kind of behind this, who's here to serve us. It's something so small, but I've realized how much of a difference and how much of an impact it actually makes to the team as well, because people actually care to learn their names. People actually ask them, oh, I'm sorry, you're not, we don't see this, so, and you are, and, they get to know a little bit more about them, engage with them a little bit more. We also provide memberships. So just like we have memberships for our guests, we also have memberships for our team that we provide actually. Our team, in fact, once they complete their probation and they're on roll with us, we actually make them members as well. We give them the benefit of being members of utilizing the same services that our guests do, that our members do. So, it's inclusion on a very different level in terms of all of this as well, because these are just small things that we wouldn't have thought much of, but bring so much joy to everybody on the team. These are just the little things that people, even the ones that have left us, Kannan, I know everybody just kind of comes back to the house, and I'm surprised to meet so many previous, ex-employees who've actually come back and they're like, there's no place like Soho. We want to come back, and of course, each one has, their own reasons for why they move on. But the numbers that have kind of come and seen with such warmth, with such heartfelt gratitude, that's something that's been very touching for me, at least, Sandhya. I mean, I think it's the small things that matter at the end of the day, and not really, it's about a leader making the time out of their schedule. It's about none of us have offices, in the entire building. None of us have offices out here. So we all actually are, the open door policy is just at a different level over here. People can just kind of straight up walk over to you and just, kind of, it's extremely refreshing in all of those senses, because it's just given people a different insight into your normal forms of hospitality. Let me put it that way.
It's basically like I'll not call it open door. It's no door, no walls, no facade kind of policy. But we actually take things a little ahead as well. and I don't know how many organizations actually do this, is we have made our customers who are our members an equal stakeholder in our inclusivity journey, right? We have actually set up a global inclusivity board, which consists of leaders from our organizations and members from our different houses. So we actually have these regular conversations with our members to really understand if there are challenges that we can still overcome. And of course, there are a lot of it. I'll not say that, we have achieved everything that we could. No, we're not even halfway down of what we can do. But the journey has begun, and the journey is on a positive note where we want everybody who is involved in our business to be equal stakeholders in our journey. And that's where our members play such an important role. And and they actually voice it out to us, and we are all, and that's what I said, right? I mean, this is another part of acceptance, is to accept these feedback and work on it, and it's not just so that's where I think the organization itself is acting differently and more inclusive, because we really want to do something about it. And it's an intention which is there is action around it. But like I said, we still have a long way to go.
Thanks, Kanan and Akanksha. I can also see a lot of questions coming up on the Q&A tab, and I think I'm almost timed out, with the set of questions. I think it's wonderful to see, and if I had to just summarize, some of the learnings I would say for myself that I'm taking back. I think one, the entire aspect of driving it top down and with a multi-stakeholder approach, which continues to mean that, it's meaningful to business because your business's most key stakeholders are your members. And at the same time, the leadership team whose key stakeholders are employees. So I think that as a governance model seems to be I think something that I'm definitely taking back, and it's so powerful to have a governance model like that. I think the second thing, just from, I think what you have shared is the amount of space and psychological safety that's been created to have a mix of both, those formal platforms and these informal conversations, letting it evolve, exploring those dilemmas, staying with those dilemmas, and then maybe trying something new. It's also great to see that that's led to some bit of, breaking of stereotypes just within the hospitality sector, whether it is working with trans people or if it's actually getting on board persons with disabilities, and even the way we look at gender and gender orientation.
I mean, on that part, I'm sorry I'm cutting you off, but on that part, I'll actually like to add that we also have our first ever HOD from the trans community as well, who's joined us a little while back. Yeah.
Great. And I think that's the other thing, that you are continuously looking at better power distribution within the organization, because I think that seems to be a common challenge in and across organizations where you hire from the underrepresented communities, but because of a lack of a visible role model that one can relate to and connect with, you also see their ability to take on more, more aspiring roles becomes a challenge. But I think when you just shared that about having women leaders, about having, HODs from the trans community, I think all of that makes such a huge difference. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Isha. We have 2 more segments left. We have a few audience queue questions that have also come up. So Isha, over to you. You can maybe take it forward from here.
So I'll just be basically being the mic of the audience right now. So I think I'll start with the questions that we tend to get a lot during our webinars. So what are the sources? So when you're talking about inclusive hiring and diverse hiring, to create that pipeline, what sources do you use? I think specifically our attendee has asked about transgender individuals, but how do you source that kind of talent?
Yeah, so we actually reached out to a formal organization which works for the transgender community, which is called KINEER, KINEER. And there's also another group called the Cure Group, which works for this, and of course the Humsafar Trust, which a lot of people know. I think these are some of the places that we have really like gone about and done this intentional hiring. But at some places we have not even done that. We have just recruited the person without knowing which gender they belong to, and it just turned out to be that somebody belongs to a particular gender, and that really shows our non-biased hiring philosophy as well.
Okay, thank you. I think for our next question, I'm going to combine a little bit because I feel like it could be along similar lines. So one question is, how do you approach the leadership team when you want to introduce the LGBTQIA+ community, and how do you basically check-ins? We've discussed the importance of check-ins and making sure, like, there are questions around where are we going, how we're doing this. So how do you approach your leadership team, and when you've approached them, how do you check in and make sure you're doing it the right way?
Sure. So I think when we approach our leadership team, it's more about talking about what are the roles and skill sets that is actually required. I mean, does it really matter which gender that role and skills, I mean, the talent and skill sets come from? So if you are able to get those talent and skill sets from any diverse community, why don't we hire them? I mean, I think that's the kind of conversation that needs to happen. I think when we look at, and especially when this is coming about introducing the LGBTQ+ community, it's all about just looking at talent and skills and nothing else. Nothing else has got to do with what work has to happen. And if you're really able to segregate these two things, that really helps build that confidence with the leadership team. You want to add anything?
Isha, also it's, I think, our own leaders or our own people actually bring about a lot of, our hires. So there's a lot of internal references. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of members, in fact, who also put across a lot of candidatures across to us, because I think they see that spirit and they see that culture within the house. So we do get a lot of people from there as well, so it's not really restricted to one pool. And I think, and I think it's like Kanan initially said, it's all about the right hiring practices. So if you have that set out there, then I think it's just about finding the right candidate.
I think that's a great point to check in on too, because if your employees recognize this as a safe space, then they'll refer like future employees to make sense.
Yeah.
I have one more. I think we'll just take a couple more questions. The next one is Soho House specific. So as you mentioned, you have numbers for the ratio for women to men at the workplace. What are the numbers looking like for from other HEGs or other diversity groups?
Correct. I think we are able to get the male to female ratio easily is because when you register for a lot of government requirements, you actually need to know the gender. So that's why that becomes easy. When you talk about other communities, we know that we have people from different communities, whether it is the neurodiverse community, the deaf community, the disabled community, the LGBTQ+ community. We know we have a lot of people belonging to these communities, but as an organization, we don't really ask them to disclose any of these facts, and that's why I can't put an absolute number to it. But from as an internal Soho House community, we know that we have a lot of people who belong to a lot of communities like this, and we also know that during one of our, I said that we have these chat shows that we do, and we actually had somebody come out in the open and tell us that they belong to the LGBTQ community. So, it's more about creating safe space. Like, I don't want to add numbers to it, but the male to female ratio is just something that happens organically because we have to collect that data for the government, nothing else.
Right. So just as a personal follow-up, also because I see this question coming in through general feedback too, because obviously, understandably, you can't outright ask employees about which maybe diverse group or HAG they belong to. So how would you, as an organization, measure success in like how well you're doing in that field, in that area?
I think it's by going through the inclusion surveys like the Great Place to Work does. I think that really gives us a fair bit of an idea of how as an organization we are being diverse and inclusive. I think it's these kind of surveys that happens, which really gives you a fair picture, because people can be honest and really upright about these things. And we've seen that actually. I mean, we also did a global employee satisfaction survey, and we actually saw that people have been really, really honest and upfront about their feedback to us. So yeah, that helps.
That's great. Okay, so last question for today from the audience, and this is actually a great segue to the next session of our webinar, three-part webinar series, which will be focusing on employees and employee cultures, like how they feed into themselves. So when you hire from diverse communities, how do you make sure they don't face any microaggression or bias from other employees? And again, follow up to that is, with any community, how do you create that safe space for employees within themselves?
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid question. And one thing that comes up is the sensitizations that we do, right? And that's very important, is before you actually introduce people from a particular community into your workforce, it's very important that we do sensitization workshops. It's not to make people feel that they're different or they come from a separate community. It's basically because of certain assumptions and stereotypes that people have in their mind, and it's really important to break those thoughts, right? And microaggressions do occur in organizations, and I think it's very important that we provide the new hires, especially from these diverse communities, the confidence that they can reach out to us, tell us about any challenges they're facing. It's very important that we reach out to them as well in regular intervals, give them a lot of empathy, give them the confidence that we are here for them. And we've actually seen that coming out, I mean, and I'll not say that we've not had our quota of challenges when it comes to microaggressions and bias, but we really dealt with them is because we were having that open, reach out philosophy, which basically helped the team members come to us and be honest about the challenges that they're facing. And it's not just about bias from regular employees, it's also bias amongst different communities and microaggressions amongst different communities that we have seen.
Exactly, makes sense. Thank you so much for answering the audience questions. I hope all of the answers, like our audience is happy with the answers. For our last segment for today, I'd like to jump to the rapid fire questions. So each question is asked to both of you. So please, both of you feel free to answer. And it's ideally just shorter, quicker answers for a fun, lighthearted end to the session. The first question is, what is a bias of your own that you became aware of, and how do you navigate around it if it arises in any situation?
So for me, surprisingly, Isha, this one was ageism. I realized in a very recent interview we were conducting, wherein this is something that actually came about. We were actually hiring for a role, and somebody extremely senior, someone who actually had enough and more expertise in that field, in that subject, but was simply close to retirement age, So this is something that I suddenly realized, and the person, what was an eye opener for me, Isha, personally, was at the closing of the interview, the person actually tells us, and Kanan happened to be, we were the ones conducting that. So, the person actually tells us, thank you for even calling me for the interview, because I've sent in my application for a lot of places, and nobody's even called me in for an interview. I'm presuming simply looking at my age, because I definitely have the qualifications. I'm confident of my role. But, it's simply because of my age. I know they don't want to have a person who's close to their last 2 years of, retirement. So that is something that I personally realized, Isha, and that's the reason I say, there's so much more to learn. I think that scope of learning, expanding our own horizon, even though we may think, we know it all, we've seen it all, something in life still kind of comes up and surprises you every single day. So I think it's just about keeping an open mind, really educating yourself every single day, and just kind of spending time with and actually giving these opportunities. I'm grateful to Kanan that he didn't review that candidate only on the basis of age, and actually kind of thought him to be obviously apt for that role. And that's my stance on this. Kanan.
My bias still comes, and I'll be very honest about it. I have no qualms, is basically when people tell me, especially the younger generation, when they tell me that they're going through some kind of depression, I still can't fathom that fact, because somewhere I feel, what's there to be depressed about in life? Because I like to look at life as one happy place all the time. And that's something that I'm getting used to it. I'm learning about it a lot more. I'm making myself accustomed to these challenges that people are facing. I think probably from when I started my career to now, when people are I think there's a lot of things that have changed, and I think that's adding a lot of stress to people's lives. I'm understanding from now, as I grow in my experiences, that not everybody looks at things the same way. Probably I like to look at things from always a happy glass, and everybody doesn't do it. And probably people really do face a lot of challenges in their life. And I'm getting used to it. At this point of time, there's a lot of reverse learning that's happening for me on that front.
And I must add that this is the gentleman that's actually also brought in mental health plans for the for all of the associates, by the way. So, so yeah.
Well, actually, we went from just mental health plans. So last year we had the EAP, which is just about mental health.
Okay.
So this year about holistic health. So we just said, not just mental health, let's include everything else in that too. So we've gone to a more holistic view on that front.
Amazing. I think from what both of you said, it's just what I'm getting is it's all about like unlearning and relearning.
Yeah.
All the time, continuously. Amazing. Okay. So our second question, who is a global leader or any icon that you think is inclusive, and why do you think so?
Interesting one.
I'll say Machli. Machli the tigress. Really, she lived an amazing life. She killed any animal that she wanted to eat. She didn't have any biases, any discrimination amongst anything. And I think we should learn a lot from animals. A pigeon flying over your head will not think twice about shitting on you, thinking which community you belong to. They really are true role models for us. If you have a pet at home, or if you like pets, you like animals, you go out on the street, you're feeding a dog, that dog is not going to ask you which community you belong to. And I think those small things, is really what, brings reality in your life. And I think we should actually go back to learn a lot from our animal friends when it comes to diversity and inclusion.
Isha, I have a new role model.
What could you possibly follow up to that?
I know. So Machli it is. Machli is the winner for today. Yeah.
There's no other option. You know what? I think that's a very relatable answer. It makes sense too. Yeah. So last question for the both of you. What is a movie or a book series, any content that you've consumed, that you think captures the sentiment of inclusion for you?
I actually look at see a lot of Bollywood movies. Mm-hmm. So for me, the off-late movies that Ayushmann Khurrana has done, a lot of his movies are actually really nice and is trying to break stereotypes. I will not name one of it, but I think most of the movies that he's been doing off late, I think starting from Vicky Donor, I think has been, kind of very, very stereotype breaking movies. And I really like the messages that his movies give out, especially from the D&I front.
Yeah, for me, I think I've been binge watching on a lot of Netflix series, and I think from the time that I remember when I was extremely young, Brokeback Mountain, which back then was like the movie that was shunned by all but still loved by all, and that was that was my first introduction, at least into anything that was inclusive and diverse. So it started from there, of course. I think like Kannan has correctly put it, a lot of good Ayushmann Khurrana movies. I've loved binge watching on Call My Agent, simple things that just very, very casually put in, different stories and together. So there have been many actually, honestly, Isha. I think book reading has gone down to a little bit of so it's become more of a Netflix and Amazon binge watching. I think for all of us.
And also for me, I think Cocomelon, the nursery rhymes are all very, very inclusive because they show all these kids. And I like to, I have two small ones, so I'm kind of relating to, watching those rhymes with them. It really shows people of different color, race, gender,
Sesame
everybody.
Street, Sesame Street was like the epitome of all of these conversations. I remember at one stage. I think we're all going to go back and start watching these.
I mean, it's great, right? That they're learning that kind of
at a younger age,
at
exactly.
a younger age. I think it's great that they're incorporating that in content. Okay, those are such like great answers. Somehow also lightened the entire conversation and were relevant. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and I'm gonna hand it over to Sandhya for closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Kannan and Akanksha. It was really great. I think we went from nursery rhymes around Brokeback Mountain to actually having diverse governance boards and some serious fun, as I'd like to, as I think this session has been for me. Thank you so much for kind of being here and sharing your learning and your journey at Soho House with the rest of the community. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. And Isha, thank you. I also know that this would be one of Isha's last webinars because she is going to be moving on for her further studies. So I also want to say thank you so much for being the pillar of, running all of these series for us every month over this year. So thanks so much, Isha, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us over, and best of luck, Isha. I hope this last webinar was your best one so far.
It's definitely the most fun.
Get better, yeah. Thank you for having us again, Sandhya and Isha, both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
evening.